Welcome our wonderful audience to our Cadence program for January 2022. My gosh, the time is flying. Folks, it's great to see you here tonight on our program. I'm Steve Boyce. I'll be your host for tonight's Cadence episode. And tonight we're talking about the era of engagement. This is a topic that I know is on everybody's mind in our audience and our community here at Cadence. And we've got a couple of great guests tonight to help us think through what's going on in engagement these days, right? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the successes? What are some of the pitfalls we need to look out for as we hope to better engage with key stakeholders like our employees or customers and prospects or any other important stakeholder group that you want to engage with to help drive your business growth. So again, folks, it's great to have you here tonight on Cadence. So happy to be back after the holidays and the new year. We hope you're all well and enjoying a great start to 2022. And in just a moment, I'm going to be bringing on our featured guests here so we can get the conversation started. Before we do, folks, I do want to remind you just real quickly, here at Cadence, you are part of the program. We want you to participate. So at the opportunities that we've built into the program, make sure you turn your camera on and your microphone on and engage with the folks at your table. Move around to the different tables, get to know other folks who are participating in tonight's program. And also, folks, keep in mind, along the bottom, you have a toolbar, which also allows you to use the group chat feature. And we hope that you take liberal advantage of the group chat feature during tonight's program. Share your thoughts and perspectives with us here. If you've got questions for our featured guests, go ahead and type those in the chat. We've got folks here monitoring the chat so we can make sure to get all of your questions answered. And we want you to participate. We want to hear your voice and hear your perspectives on the program. So thank you again for taking your valuable time to join us here at Cadence. And let's go ahead and get started with the program tonight. Folks, we've got such an exciting topic, the era of engagement, and we're going to bring on two really great guests here. At least in terms of our plan, we've got a little bit of a technical challenge here tonight, so we're going to try to work through that for you. But I want to go ahead and get the program kicked off by inviting our first guest to join us, and that will be Ron Shaw. Ron is what you would call a very seasoned technologist and communications expert with over 17 years of experience in marketing, events, and technology engagement. Engagement almost comes secondhand to Ron. He spent time working for multiple digital solutions and events companies and is now currently the executive director of digital experiences at Cadence. So we want to welcome to the program Ron Shaw. Ron, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much for joining Cadence.
Great to see you as well, Steve. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here, Ron. Now, Ron, I want to first highlight where you're broadcasting from tonight. I know your location, but share for our audience where you're tuning in from tonight.
Sure, I'm coming to you from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Beautiful, snowy Manchester. Ron, how hard did you get socked this weekend with that winter storm?
It was pretty nasty, Steve. We got, I'd say, around somewhere between 15 to 20 inches of snow.
15 to 20 inches? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. We had a light dusting here in the beautiful Atlanta area, and it pretty much shut the city down for a while. But I can't imagine counting snow in terms of feet. That's incredible. I assume you're safe though, Ron. You're a northern veteran. This isn't new to you, right?
Oh no, yeah, I grew up. This is my blood weather, so I'm used to it.
Fantastic. Now, Ron, as I mentioned a little blurb to our audience introducing you, love to have you add just a little bit of color to that brief intro. Tell our audience a little bit about your background and some of the things that you've done that sort of put you in a position to share some perspectives about engagement tonight.
Sure. So as you said, I've been in the industry about 17 years. I started off with a media publisher doing podcasts, webcast events. So that was back in the early 2000s. So really been in the virtual event space since it started really picking up. And then obviously when we hit the financial crisis in 2008, it kind of leaped forward, which was also within the short time that I'd moved over to one of the platforms. And then I spent the next 10 years working on a platform in a variety of different roles, working with clients to deliver and strategize on their virtual engagements and how they were going to deliver those. I'd say within my span of those 17 years, I've run and managed probably around in the ballpark of 1,000 events or so.
Oh my gosh. Well, given that you're always snowbound up there in New Hampshire, probably it's a good thing to keep you busy, right? When you can't get outside.
Very much so.
That's tremendous, Ron. Now tell me, give our audience a little bit of the flavor within that portfolio, that impressive portfolio of 1,000 events that you've produced and worked on and contributed to. Are they all client or customer facing events, or some internal types of employee oriented events? Give us a sense for the broad range of use cases that you've produced.
Sure. So it's been a fairly wide range. I mean, we've had anything from town halls that are just small, 10 to 15 group, to full 1,000+ people events for corporate meetings. And then I think the largest one I actually managed was around 100,000 people, which was my biggest event ever, and that was just an amazing experience to see, because I actually had the opportunity that when they did hybrid, so I had the opportunity to be on site with them at the same time. So it was just phenomenal to actually see what was happening virtual, what was happening real, and find new ways. It brought that kind of new idea of how to marry some of that together.
100,000 people. That's incredible. I can't even fathom an experience of that scale. So we're going to get more into that, I think, in a little bit, Ron. And you touched on, I think, one of the key phrases folks are tuned into these days, which is hybrid, right? So we're going to explore a little bit about hybrid engagement. We're going to explore a little bit about digital engagement tonight. Now, normally, folks in our audience, now would be the time that I would be introducing our very special second guest for the program, Tolgar Alpagut. Unfortunately, we've got a little bit of a technical challenge, what I'm understanding. I'm getting that in my ear. Actually, I don't have a thing in my ear, but I like to pretend we have a budget that supports that kind of technology. We're working on a fix. We hope to bring him back into the program at some point. So hang on there, folks. We've got a crack staff of some of the best technologists in the business between our two partners who produce the program, Ace Virtual Events and B-Dance. Really great staff here helping us with the program. But Ron, for now, it's you and me, buddy. So we're going to get into engagement. And if I could just, when the producers know that we've got him back, Tolgar back, just give me a note in the chat, and then we'll get him on the show for our audience tonight. But Ron, we've got so much to talk about. We can fill all of the time that we have. So I want to jump in. First, I saw something in the news, Ron. Maybe you caught this. I know you study the news. You're a very learned type. And I saw from the Gallup organization. Now, folks may know Gallup, very, very old, renowned brand here in the States, or maybe it's globally. I'm not quite sure where they're based. Nevertheless, Gallup does a lot of surveys around employee engagement and engagement generally, but they're known for their internal kind of employee engagement surveys. And what I saw in the news, Ron, is that U.S. employee engagement in 2021 declined for the first year in over a decade. So I think what they were tracking is in 2020, 36% of U.S. employees were considered engaged in their job, and it dropped 2 points in 21 to 34% engaged in their job. Now, that might not seem like a big drop, 2%, but I think folks who understand the impact of disengaged employees, right, understand that that can be a meaningful hit to your business. And so I opened with that little factoid, Ron, just because it was something that I caught. I wanted to share that. I don't want to necessarily start talking on the employee engagement front, but I want to get a sense from you. What have you seen over the past couple of years in just high-level engagement trends? We've gone through a very unique time period with the pandemic. And what are you seeing? Are people more or less engaged now than they have been in the past?
I think they're still engaged to a point, but it's you also have more distractions. We all have our personal friend with us all the time now, where it's a constant distraction. There's more and more things that are challenging for attention. So it would make sense that that's pulling away, and then introduce the pandemic. That is more you're in a location. Or also, it'd be interesting to know if they measured the employee engagement the same way from when people were physically in their office to when all of a sudden everybody's remote. Are you trying to measure on the same thing? So did you set your criteria to actually match the changes that had taken place? Did they line up with how they were engaging, what they were looking at for their engagement?
Yeah, it's a really interesting set of questions, Ron. I have to admit, I don't know Gallup's methodologies and processes very well. My guess is they do things, fairly professionally over there at the Gallup. But it would be curious, because it's been such an unusual time period, right? How do you make adjustments for things like all of a sudden in 2020, right, whole chunks of the workforce are suddenly forced to work from home, right, when that was not usual for large portions of the employee base. And I think this is not just a US issue, obviously a global issue. Now, Ron, I think you and I maybe didn't get impacted quite as much individually because we've both been working remotely for a while. But did you see any impact as you worked with clients or even your colleagues during that time period? Did you notice any shifts in engagement? Did they really get into virtual and digital over time? And now we're getting some fatigue. We hear a little bit about that. What are some of those big trends we've been seeing?
Yeah, I think for people that haven't done remote work before, it's a big change. There's a whole demand, not to mention you also have a lot of working parents that when the pandemic hit, they are also managing children at home. So there's a lot that you're balancing out that didn't exist in the office. So you have to figure there's noise. When you're working from home, there's a different noise than when you're in the office. There's still noise in the office, but it's just a different noise. When I'm home, it's I've got all of these things I've got to do at home too. Plus, I might have kids that are coming in and they need attention. I have to help them get set up on their school online. So it's that additional or new noise that is separated. I think for your question in regards to have I seen that? Absolutely. When I wasn't yet with B Dance in the previous company I was with, I definitely noticed that with folks that hadn't been, that they were used to being in the office when they shifted home, it was just kind of almost dumbfoundedness with them, where like, what do I do? Like, because they're not used to setting up their schedule that way on a daily basis. Of okay, it's kind of routine. You're sitting in one place. They're used to getting up. Oh, I've got this meeting. Got to go to this conference room. Where all of a sudden now it's just here we are on video, and this is this is how we're interacting.
Yeah, it was extremely abrupt, and I think for many people very disorienting, right? To suddenly wait, I got to be on camera, and I have to have my camera on, and you expect me to participate, right? That's very unusual. So I think it's been a traumatic couple of years in the engagement space, generally speaking. Ron, I'm going to save some tidbits of things I know you've done on the employee engagement side. We're going to bring some of those points back up a little bit later in the conversation because I'll want to talk a little bit with you about how to drive engagement internally with your internal teams and really foster collaboration. I know it's something that you certainly are working on at BDance and have done with other clients. We're going to shift gears just for a moment because I want to focus in on your experiential portfolio and experience in and around events. And I think we can all safely say that, boy, it's been a wild ride, a roller coaster ride in the event space, right? As folks were forced to shift programs to virtual and digital platforms just to stay engaged, right? I mean, wasn't that a key thing in 2020 is at all costs, stay engaged with your audience?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's really when we get to the fundamentals of engagement, that it's being interacting, participating. And when that's taken away, you have to find ways to do it. Um, Forcing people over into the realm of technology, many that hadn't thought about it before, hadn't gone the full route of it before, maybe had done some webinars, but then all of a sudden it's your meetings for the year, your big meetings that you bring in, your people gone. You've got to do something to replace that. So it was a major shift.
Absolutely. And as clients were faced with big challenges, Ron, of hey, I gotta keep my annual meeting, or I've got an internal sales kickoff program that we have to run this because the business counts on this. We got critical information to share. And yet, I think for a lot of organizations, they didn't have a lot of experience with virtual or digital delivery of that type of content or those experiences. As you were helping clients to make that very abrupt transition, what are the top two or three things that you advised your clients to focus on in terms of engagement, right? And sort of the mantra of keeping it simple, folks, right? Here's the two or three things you absolutely need to be thinking about to try to drive more participation. Where would you start, Ron, with that list?
I would say it all starts with education. When you're moving over into that space, it's educating your attendees on the tools that are available to them. It is about educating your speakers on how to interact with an audience that isn't sitting in front of them. I think we were in a better position because a lot of folks had done some of that, but really getting them to engage with the audience from a speaker perspective,
Mm.
I've always seen that as a challenge. And you really want them touching the keyboard constantly. You want them interacting with you in that fashion. But in order to do that, from a speaker's perspective, you can't just be a talking head with slides. You have to put in polling. You have to generate questions. So you've got to kind of push that content towards them and be like, okay, here's something you can do with. And that's part of what I mean by educate is show them how they can interact with you. Give
And
them that
and
opportunity. Yes.
and it's not just educating on, hey, these opportunities are available to you, right? Like a poll or a group chat. It's helping them to develop new skills to utilize those tools. Isn't that really the hard part?
Yeah, it's getting people comfortable. I think we're at a point where people are comfortable with technology, but it's how do you use this technology correctly? And part of a great conversation, I wish told I was here to speak with us because he brought this up. Not all technology is equal, and I think
Ah,
that's something always to be considered. You've got to know what type of engagement you're looking to have. So what type of engagement do you want your attendees to have with you? What type of engagement are they looking for? And there's always that balance because what we might want from the delivery side versus what they want on the receiving side, it's going to be different. So you've got to find that right median to get them to interact and feel like they're getting something out of it. From my side of putting on an event, I have people that have created a lot of content and spend a lot of time putting it together. So I'm going to force feed as much as that as I can. And then from the audience side, they want to be able to, especially with COVID, they wanted to interact with each other, but you've got to show them how to do that because
mm.
unless they know exactly what the tool is, they might not know that way. I think that's part of what we miss out when we've switched over from a lot of physical to virtual is in the physical space for two people to interact at an event or a conference. It's a matter of walking down and going between sessions and be like, "Hi, Bob, how you doing?"
Hey.
Right, and you have that natural conversation, or maybe you step outside for a minute to get some air, and you just end up talking with someone, and you're talking about the content. You're talking about what's happening there. In virtual, you're jumping from click to click to click, so it
Mm.
it becomes kind of like you've got to make room for that space to have your "Have you met this person?" moment to get them to start interacting, and that's what with education again. It goes back to showing them how they can have those conversations.
So I think these are fascinating insights, Ron, and I really appreciate your perspectives because it does seem, and it's been a while since I've been to an in person event. I'm having to actually try to remember what that was like. Looking forward to going back to some hopefully in the future here, not too soon. We are social beings, aren't we, humans, right? So we kind of naturally engage. Again, people have different likes and dislikes for things, and we all have different personalities, but we're generally fairly social beings in person. And then I think about the digital world, right? And like things like social media have been around a long time, right? So we're certainly social on the internet as well. What is it about like business oriented meetings or business oriented engagement, whether it's internal employee stuff or like going to a marketing meeting or a conference or something? What is it about that makes people a little less able to be social, or it takes a little bit more? Is there something unique about it being a business thing that makes it hard?
I would say to some degree, people don't want to be sold to, and that puts the brakes on. I think at times when it comes to communications, is you don't mind the interaction, you want to talk about things, but you also don't want to be sold to. So you're kind of a little more cautious when you're going into something, especially and it's also the video camera, having
Wow.
a camera, a web camera on you versus human to human. It's something that camera shock for people when they get on. Again, I think we're getting a lot better in that direction since COVID, where everybody's been on Zoom meetings and getting used to it. But before that, I mean, when I would go and do weekly meetings with clients, and I would just, it was always a rule for me: cameras on,
Right.
nobody else with cameras on. But now it's like you see that's just normal. But I really think part of that too is it's the camera shock. Like for me, I'm an introvert, so going back out into groups of people that I don't know on camera is even more stressful than going and walking in a group of people to say hello.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Ron, because I was kind of going to say the same thing. Like, I actually like the camera. It helps me feel a little less nervous and so forth. So, but I guess everybody approaches situations uniquely, right? We're all unique people and beings. And I think that's one of the challenges too, right? Is an audience of any decent size, you're going to have all kinds of different people, right? Who learn differently, who like to engage differently. And this has got to be very challenging, I would think, for event planners, for anybody who's trying to motivate an audience or a group of people to take some action, to do something, right? You gotta educate them, you gotta teach them kind of how to do that, and you may not really have a lot of time or access to your audience to kind of get that across. I'm gonna do a bit of a station ID break here, Rod, and come back to my audience for a minute. But in a second here, I'm gonna ask you some specifics about how do we teach people to engage. And folks, while Ron's mulling over that next question here, I just want to take a minute to thank you again for joining us here at Cadence. We're so excited to have you in our community. We will be breaking after a little more conversation with Ron. Ron and I are going to come out to the tables and meet with you and continue the conversation there. And then we'll continue the program back in broadcast mode in a little bit. But Ron, we want to start to get a little prescriptive for our audience, right? So you talk a lot about education. That's clearly a passion for you. How do you teach people how to engage? And how do you teach, maybe let's start with companies who are putting on these programs, right? How do you educate those organizations about how to plan for engagement, right? And create opportunities for engagement? Because what I'm hearing you say is it may not happen naturally online like it does when we're together in person.
No, it doesn't. And part of that, so in that education, you would be, for example, let's use the platform we're on today. So everybody's at tables of videos. Part of what you do first is you take the host, whoever's hosting or managing the event, and you take them through the experience. You take them, sit them at the table, have the conversation, show them how to use it. Because what you need them to do is when their folks come in, like when their audience comes in, you need to be able to have them do that. And I don't know if I like some TV series. I watch How I Met Your Mother, and it's they always do how have you met Ted? And that's what you've got to do. You've got to grab someone by the hand and grab the other person. Like, have you met Ted? And sometimes, like with a platform like this, it's at the tables of like,
Mm,
be that person in between to introduce people. So kind of get that conversation started because you're going to know maybe you talk to this person and you're like, oh, Joe and Bob would get along great talking to each other. They have this in common. Be that thread in between. There are other platforms as well that can help with that with AI that can be
sure.
introduced into it. Um, but again, it's making sure the host understands here's what we're doing from our part. Here's what we have to do in order to get these people to connect.
That's excellent, Ron. And I think this action orientation that you have is, in my mind, really, really critical, right? Because when I heard you talking about education, it's like, okay, well, we're going to teach some people, we're going to try to give them some new skills, some new information. But you're also saying, hey, grab hands, let's get together, right? Let's take some action. So there's really a combination of things that organizers need, show organizers, event organizers, experience delivery folks, right? You need to be prepared on kind of multiple layers to educate your audience, but also put them in a position where they can act, and maybe you have to grab them by the hand and lead them there, right?
Absolutely, and it's also Steve, it's a balancing act as well. Like I said before, about what the audience is expecting for engagement and what the event host or the person trying to get the engagement is expecting. It's using that and then it's finding the right type of engagement. What you've got to let everybody know what's expected of them. You can't
Mhm.
assume. When the minute you assume, it's not going to work for you. You've got to take that time and really make it part of your planning. Figure out, okay, what is it that you want people to do? Because as an audience member, I'm going to ask, what's in it for me? What do I get by doing this? Why should I be doing this? It's that value, the value proposition of what am I getting out of it by doing it? How does this enrich my life or whatever?
Yeah.
But also, I would educate clients or tell folks that we work with, be innovative. It
Mm.
just because the technology is set a certain way doesn't mean you're grounded to the rules. I mean, you're grounded to rules of technology, but you can do different things with it. Try utilizing them in different ways. And that's something I've always done for as long as I've been in the industry. As I look at something and go, yeah, but I can use it for this too. And you do that and you see what it works. I mean, you've got to some degree, you've got to be innovative and also be willing to take a risk on it. You
Uh,
potentially may not get what you're looking for, but you're going to have some good learnings that come out of it. And that's again over the course of the 17 years. That's what I've done. I've worked with people, and sometimes we've tried things that didn't work out. Other times we've found things that have been extremely successful. But it's also knowing your audience, knowing the people that you're trying to reach out to, and what motivates them.
Excellent. Ron, you have set us up so nicely for our second segment because we want you folks in our Cadence audience to take some risks with us as Ron and I break out of our broadcast mode here. We're going to be moving out to the tables to get to know you and continue the conversation. And we want you to take some risks. Share your thoughts and perspectives with us. If you've got a challenge or you've got some fear about something, right? Share that with us or others who are at the Cadence program tonight. And maybe you can find someone who can help you or has knowledge that might assist you with your challenge. So everybody, let's take some risks. Ron, we're going to break out and go talk to the audience. And then folks, after we spend a few minutes out there with you, Ron and I will come back for segment 3 to close the show. And we'll share a little bit of our thoughts about what we learned at the tables from all of you. So Ron, I'll see you out there at the tables. And then folks, looking forward to chat with you in just a second. Okay, and we're back here at Cadence. I'm Steve Boyce. So honored to be your host here for our Cadence program. I'm even more honored to welcome back to our third segment, Ron Shaw, Executive Director of Digital Experiences. It's too narrow of a title for you, Ron. Ron, great to see you. Welcome back from our segment 2 out at the networking tables with the folks. How was your experience? What cool things were you talking about, and what do you want to open with, Ron, to share with the audience here in segment 3?
Yeah, so we were talking a lot more about engagement, and one actually came up that interests me that we haven't really touched on, and it's the engagement through virtual education,
Mm,
which I find fascinating, and really the conversation was around that they don't really do any engagement when they bring the students into class. The professors just kind of launch in. There's no getting people to know each other before, like you do when you're sitting next to someone. Even a big lecture, you're still going to know maybe the 2 or 3 people sitting around you. So they're not doing that. They're not getting the people to kind of connect beforehand, and I think that has an impact on the experience that students are having through this.
very interesting. I think it's been who knows what the long-term implications are going to be, Ron, from the trauma, the educational trauma. I'll say I gotta pick my words carefully, not to be too hyperbolic here at Cadence. But look, these kids have had of all kinds, little kids all the way up to college students, have had a really, really difficult time. I think making this adjustment. It's just not the same as being in school, right? To be on Zoom. No offense to Zoom.
Yeah, no, it's a point in your life where you are kind of in your more social area of you want that human contact. As we get older and a little saltier, sometimes maybe we like that separation. But um, yeah, I think that there's definitely going to be an impact there. But I think it also raises a question if this is something that is going to continue and we really
Mm.
are going to move into a more virtual guided education system, they got to take a look at some of the impact and figure out how to make up for that, especially in the engagement. How are you getting these kids to still interact and connect with each other?
I think that's an incredible perspective, Ron, and I'd like to get that tweeted out to all the boards of education across the country and the world. They're really going to need to start thinking about this. And it's interesting you mentioned kind of this, I think we're starting to get a sense. This came up in one of the tables I was at. People are starting to get a sense that the pandemic, COVID, it's just here to stay. We're going to keep seeing probably a lot of changes, maybe new variants. Nobody really knows. None of us has a crystal ball. But Ron, you kind of captured it by saying, look, we gotta stop sort of wishing for things to go back to status quo ante, right? Like we need to start moving ahead and developing some new ways to drive engagement. Or, we could lose generations of kids who just don't get enough learning because they're not fully engaged in the process.
Absolutely, and you're right. I mean, I think to some degree, what we see now, it is reestablishing. We have to figure out what is the new norm. What are we going to do
Mm.
moving forward? Because to a degree, I think it is. This is going to be to an extent like a flu. um, but it's changed the way we live and how we interact, and this may not be the last super virus that comes through and has an impact like this. So I think we need to take the opportunity, take what we've learned from this experience, and see how we can apply that. What can we do to move forward and say, okay, so when these types of things happen, here's how our world's changed, and here's what we're going to do to adapt to it. We've got to start laying out those plans. Otherwise, we'll be running around again with our heads chopped off, going, "What do we do?" luckily, we did have some of the structure in place of the video. Although I don't know if you remember when we first started, like into the pandemic with video, how often things would freeze up, Teams would go down, Zoom would crash. Like there would just be something because the demand on those platforms was just exponential compared to what they had ever seen or whatever they probably tested for. So
Right.
it's building up the structure to make sure that we can do that. I also think with the emergence or further development of VR and augmented reality, like we're
Mm,
going to see more because those require additional bandwidth to be used. So I think that will boost up and
right.
stabilize that as well.
So it's fascinating because there's sort of this theme here about planning and preparing for the future, right? And I guess it's what all responsible adults do to some extent, right? We should all be kind of thinking about these things. And the folks at my table were very much in that vein. We got to move beyond the pandemic. We got to start talking about it seriously and the implications for it, and not avoid the discussions. Like let's be honest with the impact of this, and now the new things that we need to do, right? And you've talked about some of them. Certainly the infrastructure. I think companies like Zoom and some of the other infrastructure companies really did beef up the backbone, right? So we can all start to enjoy more of this kind of high fidelity video experience. Emma at our table said something interesting, Ron, and I wanted to get your reaction to this because she said we have a unique opportunity to really build on the tool set that people began to develop because of the pandemic, right? We all had to get on Zoom more. We had to learn how to turn a camera on and a mic. And these seem rudimentary to us now, but 2 years ago, right, that wasn't the case for most people. So as you look to go beyond the pandemic and help advise people, how would you say they should build on their tool kits and tool sets and continue to expand their new digital chops, right? So that they can actually be more engaged in whatever modality winds up to be the new normal.
So I would definitely, I would say not to move away from it. I think we're going to have a slight overcorrection at first where people want to go back out to just avoiding technology because it's been in our face for 2 years. I think taking the learnings that they've had in this time, um, and really figuring out how to build that into their normal programming, whatever it is that they're doing. Don't completely ditch it. Keep a part of it and develop it. I definitely understand the want, the desire for a lot of people to go back, but it's looking at, okay, we've learned this, we've made this step forward here. How can I continue to use it? So again, hybrid events is just it's a perfect example of that. You're still reaching your audience. You're still getting there. You're going to have a percent that will go physical, a percent that would do the virtual side of it. But it's still learning and figuring out more of, okay, here's where we've gotten with this, but how can we, like, especially for engagement, how can we grow to get these two audiences connecting with each other, even though they're not in the same physical space? And I think enter VR, we have some really new and exciting opportunities, which is where I've been spending a lot of my time in the last month or so, is really digging into VR and looking at, like, okay, how can we make this so there is more opportunity for that person to person engagement that you had before? How can we take this and make these experiences so people can still interact even though they may be distanced?
I'm so excited about VR and some of these advanced technologies, and I'm so excited in some ways that one of the I think the benefits of what we've experienced because of COVID is this rush of new technologies, right? Experiential tech, event tech, new tech in marketing, just engagement generally, right? That I think we're all going to benefit from. And I think, as you were saying before we broke into segment two, Ron, right? You want to see and try to drive and encourage companies to take more risks, right? Try a VR. See if you can see what you can learn from it, right? It's okay to fail, Ron. Isn't that what we were all taught, right? As long as you learn something.
Absolutely, and you do learn a lot. And uh, when you go into using those technologies, I think that's where there's so many of them now. Kind of what you were saying before, Steve, is that with the pandemic, when that came on, there was such a rush to develop these technologies to replace, because it was just a demand. So now we have all of these different technologies. Now it's figuring out how to put the right pieces together. Because as we said
Mhm.
earlier, not all technology is created equally. There's definitely an imbalance on those, and it's really sometimes weeding through. And I wrote a blog post earlier in the summer about this, that it's just kind of overloaded. It's product overload of here's everything, and really, what is it that you need? What is it that you need to deliver? And it's the same thing when you're thinking about engagement. There are a lot of great tools out there for engagement, but it's knowing what type of engagement you're trying to achieve. What is it that you want from your audience? What is it that they want from you?
Yeah. So well said, Ron. And I'm glad we're recording these programs so we don't lose all of that awesome wisdom. So much of that is tweetable, right? If I knew how to do the Twitter. I'm getting, Ron, we're getting some amazing reaction to your perspectives here in the chat. I just want to share a few nuggets here. You struck a chord with your comments about virtual education, and want to thank Madison and Lisbeth in our audience for your active contributions and participation. Lisbeth and Madison apparently are both in school. Lisbeth says, as a student taking classes for the last 2 years, fully agree. We need more engagement. She says most of her teachers, Ron, are hoping just to go back to new normal rather than trying to find new ways to engage their students. And Madison kind of chimes in and says, yeah, they're preparing for a new normal, but they should be looking at, how we've navigated the hardships through the pandemic and then learning from those, right, and developing new ways. So what is it about people's resistance to change? I mean, maybe that's just a human characteristic, Ron. We're getting a little philosophical here. But is that going to continue to be a challenge for us, that there will always be people resistant to changing?
You're always going to have that. I don't think anytime, and especially I think this is a fairly large change. That it's a change in culture of the way we live, we act, we work. It's been a total shift of it, and there's always going to be people that want to go back to what was. Nostalgia will rule a lot of the time for people, that this is how I remember it, this is how I want it. But we really do. We need to look at how we can move forward, because again, we're entering an age where we don't know, this could happen again.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a once in a century type thing, but let's make sure we've got everything in place for the next time it does. So we do have to move forward and progress. And I think we will. I don't think, even with the people that will move against it, sometimes it just keeps moving around you if you don't. And I feel like something with the technology now, it is going to keep moving. There's really not a lot of brakes that can be put on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum, I think, in this direction, and I'm thrilled that we've got some young professionals in our Cadence community, right? And I always try to tune my foggy old guy brain into what the younger folks are thinking, because obviously they're our future. And again, we're seeing, from Michelle and Madison and Sinaida, lots. Sinaida, by the way, wants a link to your blog post, Ron. So hopefully one of our producers can scare that up, or Ron, maybe you can multitask in the background, drop that in the chat. Folks are going to want to read that blog post. So thanks again, folks, for your active contributions in the chat. And, Ron, what we're seeing is they're embracing hybrid, right? The younger folks, but some of us old folks too, right? We see that there's benefit in that model for everybody, right? Because some of us are maybe extroverted. We like to be out in person. We like to engage that way. Maybe others would prefer to be online or engage through digital technologies, right? Maybe that's a little safer. So it strikes me that if you want to try to please the bulk of your community or audience or whatever, wouldn't you want to offer multiple ways for them to engage with you, and try to foster all of those, and not be biased to how people choose to engage?
Yeah, and what I've heard over the years, because I mean, the hybrid scare or the virtual scare has been on for as long as I can remember that I've been in the industry. Normally, the resistance is, well, we're going to chop our audience from here. If we do virtual, they won't come to the physical, and really, it's they won't come to the physical if they don't want to come to the physical. The other thing you can use is you use that virtual component to drive them to want to go to the physical. So that's where you've got a little bit more creative about the hybrid events that you do when you're doing your virtual side. Show video clips from on site, show the excitement, show the fun that's happening there. Drive that need for them to want to go. It's what's in it for me. When they see that, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll go next year. So you've built your audience. You're not going to pull away. You're going to have your people that would want to go versus your people that are going to want to stay at home. But I think what the shock that will come to, I think a fair amount of folks this year as they're trying to push, no, we're just going back full physical and not including that virtual component, is they're going to see drop. They're going to see from last year that they had a higher number when they were fully virtual. Now all of a sudden they're not offering. They're going to get some questions from like associations will have like memberships going, why can't I do this year? So I think that's going to drive it back to people really understanding. And obviously, I think the other big thing that comes up is the cost. And
Mm.
it doesn't have to be as expensive as people think. That's one of the biggest drivers always here. It's too expensive. It's not as expensive as you think if you do it right.
And it's not as costly as losing your audience, is it, Ron?
That either.
Ah, wonderful. Ron Shaw, Executive Director of Digital Experiences with Dance. Boy, this has been, as they would say, a wide-ranging but very fascinating conversation. So many great perspectives, Ron, that you've shared with us. I have these notes. I can't wait to refer to them again, which I will do shortly. This has been just a fun night, a real tour of the engagement, the era of engagement. And I feel in many ways we're at the beginning of something new here, Ron, because I think so much has changed in our world as a result of this pandemic, right? I'm not a big thinker, so I won't share any, big weighty thoughts. But I don't think things are going to go back to normal. Certainly not in the events and experiential space. People's expectations have changed indelibly. And I guess, if you were to offer some cautionary advice to anyone seeking to drive more engagement, kind of how would you sum up Ron's, top points of advice on how to move forward with a more effective engagement strategy?
I think it really comes down to continue to be innovative. You've really got to look at the opportunities that are out there. Don't feel confined into what something is supposed to do. Look at ways you can use it. Um, I think that will lead to people realizing that they have a lot at their fingertips. It's just looking at the way you need to use it. And again, sometimes that's not always going to be the way that's prescribed to do it. Break the rules, see what you can do.
Oh, God, I love that. I love that. People, take Ron's advice. Be innovative. Take risks. Don't be afraid. It's okay. You'll succeed most of the time, right, Ron? Sometimes you'll fail, but you'll learn something new.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and break our formal program now for Cadence for January 2020. It's almost February, Ron. So if we don't wrap up the show soon, then we'll be into next month's episode already. The producers are cringing, right? Wrap it up, Steve. Okay, great. So I do want to thank, on behalf of our audience here at our Cadence community, Ron Shaw, just a very special guest tonight. Ron, really enjoyed this conversation. Ron, where can folks reach out to you if they've got questions? I know that Fallon Cryer from Dance put your blog post link in the chat so folks can access that. But if they want to reach out to you, do you have a social media handle or an email you're willing to share with folks if they've got questions for you?
Sure. So my email is rshaw@bdance.co, or you can find me on Twitter at ronshaw80.
Say the Twitter one again.
Ronshaw80.
80. Fantastic. Okay, folks. That's going to wrap up the formal presentation for tonight on Cadence. As we always do, though, we're going to leave a few minutes afterwards, I think up until the bottom of the hour, which would be 7:30 here on the East Coast. Did want to make just one final program note, folks. We had hoped to have a second guest tonight, Tolgar Alpagut, with us. And he's the Senior Director of Marketing for Infinite Peripherals. Unfortunately, Tolgar, he's on the West Coast. He was going to be dialing in from his office. And apparently the office has lost their internet connection. So obviously that's a bigger deal for them as a business than missing tonight's program. But we do hope to get Tolgar back on a future episode of Cadence. So folks, watch for information about upcoming programs in our Cadence series. And we do hope to get Tolgar back on another episode. Sorry, we couldn't get those technical issues fixed. But the show goes on, Ron, and we had a great time together. There might not have been airtime anyway for Tolgar. So I do appreciate you stepping up and filling the gap with me. And want to thank our audience again for taking time out of your valuable days and nights and mornings, wherever you're dialing in from. We do appreciate and value your contributions and perspectives, as well as you help us to co-create the Cadence experience. And so with that, I will thank Ron Shaw for being our very special guest. Thanks to our partners at ACE Virtual Events and BDance. Talk to those folks. If you've got challenges with engagement, they can help you. And we do hope to see you at next month's Cadence episode. So do watch for more information on the next episode. And with that, I'm Steve Boyce. I've been your host tonight. Have a great evening. Be safe, stay well, and we'll catch you next time.